You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast. Hey, okay, full disclaimer up front. I have been noticing that since I got a new iPhone, the iPhone 11, the recordings that I'm using my phone, like these podcasts, since the coronavirus, have been just using my phone and voice memo app. They're annoying me, and I'm so sorry. I feel like I owe you all an apology. I've just been listening to them, and my voice is just like the P's are overpronounced, and I just feel like the quality is too good, if that makes any sense. And so I've been researching my team and I have been like sending examples back and forth on ways we can help kind of soften the tone. I don't record these podcasts in a studio. I record them at home, and I had sort of like this extensive setup where I had a mic and I had a buffer and I used this sophisticated, recording stuff. But since coronavirus, I have kids homeschooling right now, and I just grab my phone and I spitball in my backyard. You can hear the birds. It sounds like a solarium, and the garbage men and all of it. And I can deal with that, but I cannot deal with my voice being too pronounced. So I am so sorry, and I am trying to work on it. And one of the solutions that we came up with is you're supposed to put a sock over the phone, over the speaker of the phone. So we were trying to do this morning. I have my son's clean sock, which is ridiculous, but it sounded just as good, /bad, even with the sock over the phone. And it turns out the iPhone 11 has 3 different locations for the mic. So if I put a sock over the phone, I can't press record at the same time because I don't have access to the touchscreen, whatever. My point is this, guys. I'm working on it. I promise you that I am trying my bestest, as well as my team, to try to figure this out. But in the meantime, what I found is helpful is if my voice is like kind of annoying to you, just turn down the volume and make it really low, and my P's will be less pronounced and blah, blah, blah. I have taken up way too much time at the beginning of this podcast to talk about this issue, and I apologize. All of the programs are professionally recorded in a studio. I flew to New York City to record all of them in a studio. They're scored. They sound beautiful. So they are nothing like me, freestyling my podcasts. They're way better quality. So please do not judge my work based on the quality of these podcasts. And I also apologize for taking way too much time to explain myself. We're going to move on. You're like, Michelle, get to the helpful tip. I know. I'm on it. I hear ya. So today, I'm going to be reading you some things. I am really excited to read to you from this new book. And I know reading, something out of a text can be really boring, but I've practiced. So I am going to go slow, and I hope to make this really interesting because I'm going to read to you, and then I'm going to give you some stories to make it interesting. So today, my helpful tip is going to be about boundaries. I know. Boundaries, Michelle. Why are you always talking about boundaries? I'm talking about boundaries, guys, because we need to master them. Like, we must master boundaries. We must become a 9 out of 10 with our boundaries. And that's why I kind of beat this to death. So there are there's more than 2, but I'm going to only cover 2 because I want to keep it super simple, and anything more than 2 and you probably will forget, because I know I would forget. So we're going to talk about 2 different types of people, and I want you to try and identify which one you fall into today. There's the people that have non-existent boundaries, all right? Now I'm reading this. I did not come up with this myself. This is from Pia Melody, who I'm in love with. She wrote the book Facing Codependence, and this is a great book. So she talks about non-existent boundaries. This might be you, where you have like zero self-protection. So here it goes. People with non-existent boundaries have no sense of being abused or of being abusive. Some people may have trouble saying no or protecting themselves. They allow others to take advantage of them physically, sexually, emotionally, or intellectually without clear knowledge that they have the right to say, "Stop that. I don't want to be touched," or "I am not responsible for your feelings, thoughts, or behaviors." A codependent with no boundaries not only lacks protection, but has no ability to recognize another person's right to have boundaries with the codependent. Therefore, a codependent with non-existent boundaries moves through other people's boundaries, unaware that he or she is doing something inappropriate. Basically, what this means is that maybe you grew up in an abusive family, verbally, emotionally, physically, or you've just been in a relationship or a series of relationships with somebody who is verbally or financially or emotionally abusing you, and you're so used to being abused that the idea of exercising a boundary around the abuse is foreign. It's like a foreign concept to you. You're like, wait, what? I can say no? Or sometimes that's not okay. Doesn't everybody do that? I remember so clearly when I was married to a good man who struggles with addiction. I was with him for 10 years, and by like year number 5, I quickly adjusted to the new normal of abuse in my daily life. And it became so common that it was casual. It wasn't even a big deal anymore to be emotionally abused. And so when I finally decided to leave for the sake of my children, I almost became unbrainwashed. I don't know if that's a word, but I just made it up if it isn't. I started to, like the fog began to clear. I started to see clearly, oh, wait a second. Like, what I thought was normal was actually incredibly unhealthy. And most women, and all women that are in healthy marriages, but most women aren't suffering the way that I'm suffering. They don't get yelled at by their husband. They don't get left by their husband. Their husbands don't have affairs. Their husbands don't lie to them. Their husbands don't take money out of their bank account. They don't open credit cards in their names only and rack up debt. They don't miss days of work. They don't lie. They don't go around lying to people to cover up their addiction. That just became so second nature to me. It became my new normal. So I didn't have boundaries around that first marriage because I became conditioned, as therapists would say, to this new normal. And the funny thing is that I would have called myself a very strong woman when I met my first husband. In fact, I think that's actually why he wanted to marry me, to help, my strength would help him get his life together. I think that's what made him attracted to me in the first place. So it's funny how we start off as such strong, independent, helpful women, and slowly we get this disease conditions us to become weaker, and our values and our morals that we entered the relationship in start being so compromised over time that they're lost. We justify and we make excuses for why the values that we cherished going into this relationship no longer, are recognized. And we do this because we let go of our boundaries. We let go of being strong. We let go of our independence and our values and our morals because we are in love with the person that's suffering from addiction. And how can you possibly have those standards and boundaries in place and stay, married with somebody who's constantly challenging that? So you say to yourself, well, maybe those values aren't so important anymore. Maybe it's not so important. Like if if it was important for you to go to church every Sunday and your husband said, no, because he was hungover. Well, you start to say, well, maybe I didn't like that church so much anyways. Or let's say maybe you have a child who's in sports and your spouse doesn't show up for games, but when you were young, you always imagined you and your future partner going and cheering on your kids in all sports. But now they don't because they're hungover, they're partying or whatever. And you compromise that value. You justify, you say, well, they're tired and they've been working hard anyways and they'd just be grumpy. So it's really not that important to our child that they have both parents there. Right? Like you start making excuses, and that's a dangerous place to be at. And that's why when we say your work is your work, whether they get sober or not, this is part of your work, is reinstating your boundaries and reinstating your morals and your values and not settling for less. So that's number one. You can fall into that category where you've just lost your boundaries and you don't even recognize you have the right to exercise them. Or you can fall into this other category where you have a damaged boundary system and your boundary system has holes in it. So people with damaged boundary systems, Pia is writing in the book, can at times or with certain individuals say no, set limits, and take care of themselves. But at other times or with other people, they are powerless to set boundaries. And for such men and women, there is protection only part of the time. For example, a person may be able to set boundaries with everyone but authority figures, or his or her spouse, or his or her child. Or the person can usually set boundaries except when he or she is tired or sick or scared. Does that sound like you? Where, okay, maybe you've taken the boundary program and you've said, Michelle, I got it. I know my boundaries. I did all the worksheets. I've identified my boundaries. I am very clear on what they mean and what they are, because a lot of people are confused about what boundaries are. And I know what they are. I've identified them. And when I am feeling strong and when I am feeling secure and when I have taken care of myself, I can really stand strong in my boundary. But when I am challenged or with certain people that I'm intimidated by, or maybe if you're just sick and tired or scared, you have holes in your boundaries, like Pia stated. So this is why, you guys, it is so important every day to exercise self-care. And I know self-care is such a buzzword right now, and I hate using buzzwords. I hate being trendy like that, but it does do an excellent job of summarizing very quickly all the ingredients one needs to care for oneself. So are you getting enough sleep? Are you doing a good enough job putting down your iPhone at night or your phone, turning off the lights, making a really dark room, investing in some, light out curtains, or I don't have curtains in my room yet. We're saving our money to get some because those curtains are expensive. But I bought like a $5 eye patch to put over my eyes so I can sleep in on weekends because I have a really hard time sleeping in if there's light in the room. Are you making sure that your bedtime routine is nice and relaxing? Are you making sure the room is cold enough? Sleep is so important to your mental health. Are you trying the idea of meditation? I'm trying. I'm not great at it. I got to be honest. I have a little bit of a mind that wanders, but I'm trying meditation. Are you getting exercise? I am trying myself to exercise 6 days a week. I'm really trying to make a concerted effort for self-care, and I find exercise, I hate exercise, y'all know me, but I am trying a bunch of different stuff to see if there's anything that I like, and if not, I just force myself to do it anyways because I know it settles me down and calms my anxiety or concerns for the day, and it helps me feel better. I know we're all busy. I get it, you guys. I work, I have kids, I understand. But we can be so much more happier and healthier all around as human beings if we prioritize this type of self-care. Those are the three. Also eating right, and not all the time, because I had a cookie for breakfast this morning. So, look, my daughter bakes really good chocolate chip cookies, and they were just sitting there on the counter waiting for me when I walked downstairs this morning. And listen, coffees and cookies are delicious together. So yeah, are we going to be perfect about it? No, but I'm eating a veggie burger for lunch. So self-care in moderation, right? Self-care in moderation. And when we practice self-care, I think it's easier for us to implement our boundaries. We are more courageous. We are more healthy and solid. And you guys know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You get it. When you are mentally present, it just makes life easier. It's less stressful, particularly when you love someone suffering from addiction. So are you practicing those things? And I promise if you do, I think the holes in your boundaries are going to be less. It will be less holy, your boundaries. Does that make sense? So also today, when you're listening to this, think about, is there anyone in your life that you do struggle setting boundaries with? Like, are there certain people? It can even be parents. She doesn't mention that, but it can also be parents that you're struggling with. So here's a story I promised you about a woman I know who exercised some great boundaries, and I was so impressed. I asked her if I could use it for the podcast. She said yes, because she's kind like that. So her husband doesn't suffer from addiction, but I still think we can learn from her. Her and her husband this past weekend got into a bit of an argument. Actually, it wasn't even an argument. He just hurt her feelings. And she is very mature and very wise and has grown significantly over the years. And so she can communicate her feelings without nagging or crying or screaming or, having a temper tantrum or passive aggressiveness and walking away and storming off or rolling her eyes with contempt. She's a very wise, mature woman. So she communicated to her husband and said, look, I love you, but what you just did hurt my feelings. And, I need you to help me figure this out. And then she got distracted. One of her kids called her away, she said, and she had to make breakfast. So she walked downstairs and started the day. And the whole day she went about, cleaning the kitchen. She did some vacuuming. She folded some laundry. She exercised, went for a walk, talked to a couple friends. But the whole time she was going about her day, she was waiting for her husband to actually think about this and come up to her because he was in the wrong. Like, I'm not just saying that because she was my friend. He really was in the wrong. And she was waiting for him to approach her and say, hey, I've given this some thought. Why don't we talk about it? And he didn't. Like, she was kind of watching him out of the corner of her eye. You know how you do that? Like, you keep tabs on someone. He was like watching some TV. He was cleaning out some vents in the house. He was doing all of his chores, weekend chores, but he wasn't like approaching her. And she's like, okay, that's interesting. It's just taking longer for him to find some solutions. And she even said he was on the computer for a little while. Like, she walked upstairs and he was sitting on the computer, and she's like, oh, maybe he's Googling like what to do. Like, maybe he's really researching an answer. And later on, she found out he wasn't. Like, he wasn't looking at anything that had to do with this argument or this instance. So 4 o'clock rolls around, and she's not getting upset, but she's like, I know he likes to play softball, baseball, and usually the kids all pile into the car and cheer him on, and they love going to his games and like really like clapping for him and giving him a thumbs up in the stands when he looks over. Like, it's like this really nice thing to do. And so he had a game at 4, and she's like, I wonder if he's expecting us to all like go cheer him on again. So at 3:55, he walks into the room that she's at, and he stands at the doorway, and he's like, look, I know you're upset with me, but I have this game. I have to leave in 5 minutes. Are you planning on coming? Now, she had been thinking about this because she's wise and she's calm and she's mature and she loves this man and she trusts this man. She had been thinking about, okay, instead of me saying yes or no, I'm going to go to this game or I'm not, thinking about how it would make him feel, she asked herself, how would it make me feel? Let me picture myself getting into this car and doing the big, encouraging cheerleader, type of mentality for him at this game. Would that feel okay to her? And then how would it feel if she said no and stayed at home? There is a long list of things she could actually do while he's playing his game to prepare for Monday, because this was yesterday on a Sunday. And she thought long and hard about it, and she said to him, I love you, and I promise I'm not saying this because I'm mad, but if I were to go in the car and cheer you on for the next 2 hours, I would feel really resentful, because the reason you're deciding to talk to me at 3:55 is because you want me to cheer you on. You want something from me. And normally I love supporting you, but I needed your support this today. And I waited for that. And I was really hoping that you would make our relationship a priority. And it hurt my feelings that you not only are neglecting, having a really great talk with me that could, help us move forward, but you're now expecting me and asking me to show up for you. And so, not out of anger and not out of spite, but out of self-respect for myself, I'm going to say no, go have a good time, and, I'll be here at home. I'm going to skip this one out. And he looked at her and he got really quiet. And he thought long and hard, and he's a good man. And he thought long and hard about what she said. And he said, okay, I understand. I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. You're right. I should have talked to you. I was hiding. I was hiding out and I was hiding away because I felt embarrassed because I knew I was wrong. And I didn't want to face up and own up to my mistake. And I'm really sorry about that, because I'm a grown man and I should have had the courage to come talk to you about it. And I respect your opinion. And she said, okay, that's great. Thank you for explaining that to me. I completely understand, why it's difficult to talk. No one likes making mistakes or admitting they did. Go have a good game. So even with his apology, she's still kind of, with love in her heart and self-respect, said, I'm a solid no. I'm a solid no thank you on this. So he goes downstairs. He goes, okay, I respect that. He goes downstairs and she hears the back door close. And she's like, gosh, I feel really good about that conversation. That went really well. We still haven't talked about it, but I feel so proud of myself that I was mature and that I clung on to my self-respect. There was no yelling, there was no resentfulness, there was no blaming. It felt really, really healthy, right? So all of a sudden, she's in the room and she hears footsteps coming back up the stairs. And she's like, that sounds like his footsteps. You know how you can recognize your household's footsteps? And she's like, that sounds like his footsteps. And all of a sudden, she's sitting at her desk and he pulls up the chair and sits next to her. And she looks at him and she's like, what are you doing here? And he said, he starts crying, you guys. He starts getting tears in his eyes. And he's like, it's just not the same without you. I love playing because I love looking up and seeing you in the stands cheering me on. I don't want to play without you. And I feel like I should be here with my family, and the right thing to do is to talk this out with you. So I'm going to not go to the game, and I'm going to sit here, and I choose you. I choose to stay. I choose to be here with you. And she was floored and looked him right in the eye and said, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you said that. And that makes me feel so important. Are you sure? Because I'm not mad. And he said, no, I'm not. I'm 1,000% sure. And he grabbed his phone and he was there's a group chat, and he was trying to let the group chat know that he wasn't going to show up. And apparently there was a few players that weren't going to show. And so they might not have been able to play the game. And he looked up at her and he said, okay, I'm going to ask you, what should I do? Because I'm now looking at the roster and I'm realizing that they're short many players. And if I don't show up, I just don't want to be viewed as being rude. So can you help me? Should I go? Help me make the right decision here with this information. And she looked at him and she thought, what feels right for me right now? Checking in. And she said, okay, let's go. I'll go with you. Let's get in the car. And she got in the car and she drove to the game, and it was a wonderful time. And it was a moment where she went, but it was based on, she knew what he was doing with the roster situation was not a manipulation, because she could tell. You know how you can tell when someone's really coming from an honest place? They're not trying to, sneak anything by you. They're saying something to you and it's raw. That's how she knew he was not being manipulative. So she got in the car and she went, and the whole time she felt so good about honoring her own choices, her own decisions, her own feelings. And that is what it means when you have healthy boundaries. It doesn't mean your boundaries can't change moment to moment. It doesn't mean in the span of 3 hours you can go from a no to a yes. You don't have to be solid no despite. You can change no to a yes, but it has to be because you feel like it's honoring your feelings. It has to be something that you're not making decisions based on how you think other people are going to react to your no or yeses. You're checking in with yourself and you're saying and you're imagining the future. You're projecting into the future and you're saying, okay, I'm going to imagine the situation. I'm going to think about how I'm going to feel. I'm going to make the decision that best honors my feelings. And you know yourself well enough to be able to do that. Because more than likely, you've been with the person that you love that's suffering from addiction for a while now. And more than likely, the decisions or mistakes that they're making are repetitive. You can look back on your history with this person and pretty much predict your future. Like, you have that ability. Because there are a lot of themes, common, consistent denominators that are going on in your past that will continue to go on in your future, that will help you make great decisions and great calls of judgment, which is why I always say you must trust your gut. Your gut is right. It is true. It is your instinct. Listen to it. Do not let addiction, the voice of addiction, that nasty negative voice, sway you and manipulate you to go left or right. Your voice is the center. Stay in the center. Listen to your gut. And you will continue to make very wise, wonderful choices using the past to predict your future. And you will continue to make wonderful choices that honor boundaries. And you can change those boundaries moment to moment the more you practice this. You can be flexible, is what I'm trying to say. So I hope that story gave you some example, not only of somebody who in real time adjusted their boundaries and took and what it really looks to look like into what your self-boundary is, but also I hope it helped you recognize that, oh my gosh, you guys, I just totally lost my train of thought. Getting old. I just lost it. It was such a good train of thought too. And that's the problem with not writing down your podcasts and reading from a script. And there's a lawnmower too. So whatever. You got enough out of this podcast, some takeaways. So I love you all. Thank you for being flexible with the background noise and my inability to remember everything that I wanted to say. I love you. You've got this. And I wish I could end this without this lawnmower in the background, but I think he's here to stay. You got this. I got your back. I'm here with you. I'm cheering you on. Every week, it's okay if you stumble. It's okay if you fall. Like we went over a couple weeks ago, you just dust yourself back up, keep trying, and you're going to get better and better and happier. Even if you've had a rough week this last week or a bad weekend, because I know weekends are rough, next weekend you can be better. You can do better. I promise you. I am your greatest fan, and I love you. I'll talk to you later.
This podcast is created for your support, encouragement, and entertainment with Michelle's personal thoughts and beliefs. From one woman to another, bonded together by the fact we love someone suffering from addiction. This is not intended as a substitute for therapy or advice from a professional.